Hello everyone, hello. This year is dedicated to Lili Nishmas Rachalea Bas Reb Chaim Tzvi. Okay, so we're in the middle of discussing the mitzvah saseh that a person violates if they speak Lashon Hara. And the mitzvah we're in the middle of is mitzvah Gimel, judging your friend favorably. Okay, and we discussed it at some length in the previous class. Then we went a little further to point out that often mitzvah Gimel of judging someone favorably can really be the way that one can avoid makabel Lashon Hara. It's also to believe Lashon Hara. What are you supposed to do? Someone speaks Lashon Hara to you, someone who you trust, a friend, a relative, someone who you know tells the truth most of the time. They speak Lashon Hara to you, and it's also to believe it. So what are you supposed to do? Assume the person's lying? That's sometimes very difficult. So we discussed last class that the Chofetz Chaim explains very clearly in Klal Vav, footnote Aleph, that the Isser is not believing the facts. The Isser is believing the negative ramifications, the degrading of the person based on the facts. If you can say to yourself, there must be an explanation, so then even if the bare facts might be true, and I don't have to assume the person speaking to me is lying, I can still avoid the Isser D'Oraisa, Kabbalas Lashon Hara. And so therefore, mitzvah Gimel, of judging people favorably, really plays a major role in avoiding the Makabel Lashon Hara. Very important idea. Last class, at the end, I told a famous story from Avari Levine, Tzaddik in our time, a wonderful story about judging someone favorably. There must be an explanation. And I have one more story along those lines. The story is a little less famous. The story, I think, is somewhat humorous, and the story does contain a little bit of Tsar Bali Chaim. I discussed with Rabbi Beinish, they said it's worth it to tell the story anyway, because of the tremendous help it could be. And I have students who they hear this story, and when they hear Lashon Hara, they think of this story, and they're able to avoid being makabel the Lashon Hara, and avoiding the Isser by not accepting the negative ramifications, by saying to themselves, there must be an explanation. I read this story in Ornet. Ornet was a weekly, Parsha weekly, that was put up by Or Sameach for several years. I read this maybe 10 years ago in Ornet. So the story goes as follows. The Russian Coast Guard, there was a Russian Coast Guard, was going out in a boat out there off the coast of Russia, and the Russian Coast Guard finds some Japanese men basically floating in the water. Strange, right there, in Russian international waters. The Russian Coast Guard says, why are you over here in our waters? What are you, spying on us? And the Japanese people say, listen, we're fishermen. We're Japanese fishermen. We're in a boat, and a cow comes down from Shemayim, whatever the Japanese word for Shemayim is. A cow comes down from Shemayim and smashes our boat, and here we are floating here in the water. The Russian Coast Guard says, that is the most ridiculous story I've ever heard. You guys are spies. What are you, a cow from Shemayim? What are you, crazy? And the Russian Coast Guard, they take them and they put them in jail. So now they're in jail. This is a true story. They're in jail. All right. Now, Russia for many years was fighting a war in Chechnya. It's a little one section. Okay. And many years in this war, and the Russians send soldiers to fight in Chechnya, and then they come back. Okay, many years. Okay, they say it's like the Russian Vietnam. All right. And for many years, the Russian economy was terrible, horrible, falling apart. People weren't getting paid, nothing, and the soldiers weren't getting paid. So what happened was, the story goes, and this story came out a few weeks later, as we'll see why. Some Russian soldiers were fighting in Chechnya, and they knew they weren't going to get paid because no one was getting paid then. They had an idea, here in Chechnya there are cows. So some of the Russian soldiers decided to take a cow with them and steal a cow from Chechnya and bring it back to Russia. So they do that. They bring a cow onto the airplane. They're flying back to Russia. Well, I guess cows and airplanes don't go together so well. The cow goes a little berserk, and they don't have a choice because the cow's going crazy on the airplane. So they had to eject the cow from the airplane. All right, they eject the cow from the airplane. They get back. Now, obviously, this type of story, it's a little strange. This story. Actually, this story is not strange as in striking, as we've said before. This story is strange as in weird, strange as in very weird. And if you're a soldier, you don't have everyone talking about this because I assume it was illegal. It takes a little while, and after a couple weeks later, the story comes out, and it's in the newspaper that these Russian soldiers actually pushed the cow, kicked the cow, pushed the cow off an airplane. All right, strange. Well, the Russian Coast Guard is. The guy who works in the Russian Coast Guard is reading the newspaper. He reads about this